The gate bell did not ring before the shot came, and that was the first wrong thing. Ruth Asher knew the road the way other women knew a husband's breathing. On a cold, clear, moonless night in the middle of October, she knew that no honest coach took the bend 100 yards above her gate without slowing for the dark. So when she heard the team come up the rise too fast, and then the flat, hard crack of a fowling piece where no fowling piece had any business being, she was already on her feet with the lantern in her hand before the horses began to scream. Thinking came later. She came out into air that bit like a dog, and ran up the verge with the lantern swinging, and the light caught the wreck all at once. The carriage gone broadside into the ditch with one wheel still turning in the air, the team down and thrashing in the traces, and a man lying still in the road. That was the coachman. She knew before she reached him. A body in the road has a stillness a living man cannot counterfeit, and Hiram Lemmer had it, half in the verge with his face to the frost, and there was nothing in the world Ruth could do for him. There were two she could do something for. She went to the carriage. The door hung open above her like a lid, and inside, folded against the splintered seat, was a gentleman with his hand pressed to his own side, and dark wet coming through his fingers, and beside him, small and white and silent, a little boy. The boy was the thing that moved her. He had a ball through his shoulder, and he was not crying, and a child too frightened to make a sound frightened her more than the blood. "Give me the boy first," she said to the gentleman. He could not speak. His eyes found her over the lantern. A question in them she had no time for. She reached up and took the child under the arms, careful of the bad shoulder, and brought him down against her hip, and he turned his face into her neck and held to her collar with one small fist, and held and held. "I have you," she said. "I have you both." She got the gentleman out by main strength and by the apron rope she kept looped at the gate arm. For the nights a drover refused his toll and wanted to argue it with his fists. 12 years of the winch had given her shoulders that men were surprised by. She got the rope under his arms and walked backward down the verge with it biting her palms, and dragged the Duke of Avonmere down the Great North Road on his heels, though she did not yet know he was a duke, and would not have cared. She laid the man on the long deal table where her toll book lay open, swept the book aside without closing it, laid the boy on the truckle in the back room, and went out one more time into the cold. She wound the gate arm down across the road, set the board that said the gate was closed for repairs across the way, and bolted her own door. And then, standing in her kitchen with 2 bleeding strangers and the smell of powder still in her nose, Ruth Asher did the only thing left that was hers to do. She went back to the table, and she opened the man's coat to see how badly he was hurt. She had nursed a wound before, the worst wound she would ever know, the one that had killed her husband on the 4th day. Her hands had learned everything they knew on Caleb Asher's dying, so she knew, working by candle and kettle in the small hours, that the gentleman would live if the fever did not take him. The ball had gone through his side and out again, and torn nothing it could not spare. She packed and bound it the way Dr. Moore had once shown her, with linen torn from her own marriage sheets, because the marriage was over, and the sheets were not doing anything else. The boy was the harder case, and the easier. The ball had lodged shallow in his shoulder, and she got it out with the small knife she kept for the toll-book quills, and he made one sound, one only, then watched her with his father's eyes and said nothing. She did not sleep that night. She sat between the table and the truckle and watched 2 chests rise and fall, and somewhere toward dawn she understood that she had closed her gate to the Bedford Trust for the first time in 3 years, and did not regret it, and that not regretting it was a thing she would have to account for later, when the sky in the window went from black to the colour of dirty wool. She made tea she did not drink, and stood at the hearth with the kettle in her hand, and said her husband's name aloud into the empty kitchen. "Caleb," she said. It was the first time she had said it in a long while. The village half a mile down the road called her the widow at Asher's, and did not trouble to learn she had ever been anything else, and a name you do not hear from anyone you stop saying to yourself. But she said it now, over the steam, with 2 of someone else's people breathing in her house, and she did not know why, except that the night had opened something in her that had been shut a long time. "Caleb," she said again, "look what's come through the gate." The boy stirred on the truckle. She went to him at once. His eyes were open. He looked at her the way the very young look at the world when they have decided it is not to be trusted, steadily, without hope, ready to be hurt. "Lady," he said. His voice was a thread, Lady, where is my papa? Sleeping, on the table where I can watch him. He's hurt, but he'll mend. You're both in my house and the gate is shut and no one is coming in that I don't open it for. Do you understand me? He thought about it. 4 years old, and he thought about it like a man. Are you a gatekeeper? He asked. I am, she said. Papa says gatekeepers are honest people. Some of us, Ruth said, and that was nearly the first thing that had made her want to smile in 3 years, and she did not let it, because the boy needed steadiness more than smiling. She brought him broth in a cup and held it to his mouth, and when he had taken what he would, his hand crept out from under the blanket and closed on her sleeve. He did not let go for 3 days. The man on the table woke on the evening of the second day, and the first thing he did was lie. She had known he would. A man who has been shot at for a reason does not wake in a stranger's kitchen and tell the truth, not first. She had watched his face all that day, even fevered, and thought, there is more wrong with this man than the hole in his side. He opened his eyes and found the ceiling, then found her, and she watched him decide. Where is my son? He said. Not the first lie, the first true thing, and it told her more than any lie could have, because a man's first true thing is what he is most afraid for. Through that door, on the truckle, mending. I took a ball out of his shoulder, and he has not let go of my sleeve since I carried him in. He is the bravest small creature I ever saw, and he wants his papa, so you will be so good as to live. She wrung the cloth and laid it on his brow. Now, who are you? There it was. She watched him reach for the lie. My name is Mr. Wynne, he said. I was travelling north on private business. We were set upon by a highwayman. No, Ruth said. He stopped. You were not set upon by a highwayman, she said. I keep this gate, and I know the road north of Stilton by the sound of a team at the bend. I heard your coach come up too fast for an honest man. I heard one shot from above the road, from the oak on the south verge, from a piece too long in the barrel to be a horseman's pistol. One shot, and it took you through the side and your boy through the shoulder both, which a pistol could not do at the range. A highwayman who meant to rob you would have come down to the road. No one came down, Mr. Wynne. Whoever fired meant you dead in the ditch beside your coachman, and when you did not oblige him, he rode south through my gate in a hurry. 2 of them, at 11:15. I have it in the book. You have it in the book, he repeated. I have everything in the book, Ruth said. Every wheel that passes this gate by the hour, by the team, by the paint on the door. 2 horsemen north at 42 minutes past 9, unpaid. The same 2 south at 18 minutes past 11, faster. 1 horse near foundering. I wrote it down before I knew it mattered, because I write everything down. That is what a gatekeeper is. She did not tell him she had wept while she wrote it, that the steadiness of the clerk's hand had been the only thing keeping her upright at a table where his blood was drying. She told him the facts, because the facts were what would keep him and the boy alive. She had long since learned to give people that instead of what she felt. So, she said, Mr. Wynne, try again. He was quiet a long moment, and when he spoke his voice had changed. Not yet, he said. I am sorry. Not because I doubt you, because the less you know, the less they can do to you when they come back. And they will come back, mistress. Asher, she said. Ruth Asher. And I will not be kept ignorant in my own house for my own protection. That is a thing men say to women to keep them quiet, and I have buried a husband, and I keep this gate alone, and I am done being kept quiet. You'll tell me who wants you dead, or you'll take your boy back out onto a road where the man who shot you is waiting, and we will see how far protective silence carries you with a hole in your side. It was the longest speech she had made to another adult in a year. The man closed his eyes, and then, to her astonishment, the corner of his mouth moved, not quite a smile, the ghost of one, the first she had seen on him. My father, he said, would have liked you very much. He had no patience for protective silence either. He opened his eyes. Very well, but not tonight. I have not the strength, and you have not slept, and my son needs you more than the truth does. Tomorrow I will tell you all of it. I give you my word, and it is worth more than the name I gave you. It could hardly be worth less, Ruth said, and went to the boy. But she believed him. She believed his word, though she did not believe his name, and she had stopped believing men's words about the time she stopped saying her own husband's. She did not like it. It was a crack in a wall she had spent 3 years building. She lay down at last on the settle by the fire, within arm's reach of the truckle, and the boy's hand found her sleeve in his sleep, and she let it, and she stared at the ceiling and thought, "This will cost you, Ruth, the way the last one did. You know exactly what this is." And then she slept, because she had not in 2 days, and for a few hours the house held. 3 nights passed before the boy spoke a second time, and it broke her a little. A routine had established itself by then, the way a routine will even in the strangest house. She fed the boy and dressed his shoulder. She dressed the man's side and helped him to sit, then to stand, then to cross the kitchen on her arm and back, a little farther each day. When a carter came up wanting through, she sent him round by the Wyboston Lane, and that was the world's whole traffic with the house for 3 days. The man was Mr. Wynne still by daylight, by their unspoken treaty, until he should be strong enough for the truth. But she had seen the ring on his little finger, black enamel and a seed pearl, a woman's mourning ring far too small for his hand, and how his thumb went to it when he thought no one watched, and she had drawn her own conclusions and kept them. On the 3rd dawn she was at the hearth with the kettle, as she was every dawn, and the boy was sitting up wrapped in her shawl watching her, and the man was asleep on the table bed with his face turned away. And the boy said, into the quiet, "That's my mamma's ring, on Papa's hand." Ruth turned. "Is it?" she said gently. "She died," the boy said. He said it the way children say the enormous things, flatly, a fact among other facts, because they have not yet learned which facts are meant to be unspeakable. "She died when I was a baby. I don't remember her. Papa doesn't say her name. Nurse said I'm not to ask, because it makes Papa sad." He looked at Ruth with his father's steady eyes. "Do you have a mamma?" "I did," Ruth said. "She died too, a long time ago. And I had a husband named Caleb, and he died. And I say his name as much as I like, because I think the dead would rather be spoken of than forgotten." She crossed to him and crouched by the truckle. "What was your mamma's name? You can tell me. It won't make me sad. I never met her, so all I'll have of her is what you tell me." The boy's mouth worked, and then, in a whisper, like a word he had been keeping somewhere safe, "Mama." It was not a name. It was the only name he had for her, and Ruth understood, kneeling on the cold flags, that this small person had not said even that word aloud in his own house in a long time, because the word made his father sad, and a 4-year-old learns very fast which words are forbidden. "That's a good name," she said, and her voice was not as steady as she would have liked. "That's the best name there is." She did not see the man wake, but when she rose and turned, the Duke of Avonmere was lying with his eyes open and his face wet, looking at his son and at her, and he said, in a voice scraped raw, "Lucinda." The boy went very still. "Her name was Lucinda," the man said. He was not speaking to Ruth. He was speaking to his son across the kitchen, across 2 years. "She had dark hair like yours, and she laughed in a way that made other people laugh without knowing why, and she wanted you more than she wanted to be safe, and that is why she is gone. And I have been angry at you for it every day of your life without once saying so, and that was the worst thing I have ever done, and I am sorry. I am so sorry, Theo." The boy got off the truckle and crossed the kitchen on his bare feet with the shawl trailing, and climbed up onto the table bed beside his father, mindful of his own bad shoulder and his father's bad side, and lay down against him, and the man put his arm around him and held on. Ruth went out into the cold yard and stood by the gate arm with her hand on the winch and let them have it without her. She had wanted a child. She had a small set of clothes folded in the bottom of a chest, once for a child that had not come and now would not. She had thought that wound scarred over. She found, with her hand on the cold iron, that it was only shut, and that the last 3 days had opened it the way the carriage had opened her quiet life, all at once without asking. When she went back in, the man was sitting up against the wall with the boy asleep against his chest. He looked at her over his son's dark head. "His name is Theodore," he said. "Theo. Lord Theodore Winford, 4 years old, the only thing in the world that matters to me, and 3 days ago I had not spoken to him as a father in 2 years. You did that. You opened something I had bolted shut." "You opened it," Ruth said. "I only kept the gate." "Sit down, Mistress Asher," the man said. "I find I have the strength after all. I'm going to tell you who I am and what was done to me on that road and who did it, and then I'm going to ask you for help. No honest person should have to give, but you should know all of it first. You have earned it." She sat at her own table with the toll book open at her elbow, folded her calloused hands and said, "Tell me then." His name was Augustus Winford, 5th Duke of Avonmere, and the man who had paid for the fowling piece on the oak was the man who had taught him Greek. He told it plainly, which she respected. His wife Lucinda had been a Yorkshire heiress, and he had married her for love against every pressure to marry elsewhere, and she had borne him Theo and died of it. And he had spent 2 years being a kind father in everything but speech, because every time he looked at the boy, he saw the price. He had set out north for 2 reasons. His late wife's brother, Lord Calbrook, had at last asked to meet the nephew he had never seen, and the Avonmere accounts were due their yearly review in London before the quarterly audit. "There is a man," he said, "named Sir Geoffrey Penrhys, my father's closest friend at Oxford 50 years ago, my godfather, my own tutor at Christ Church. He taught me my Greek and a great deal of what I believe about honour, which I now find rather bitter. When my father died, he was named senior trustee of the Avonmere estate, and when my wife died, senior trustee of her separate Yorkshire holdings as well. He has had his hand on the family's money for 15 years, and I trusted him as I would my own father, and I never once looked at the books, because a gentleman does not insult an old friend by examining his accounts. And he robbed you." "I believe he has been robbing me since before I was master of it," the Duke said. "Speculating, sugar, company stock, tin mines that came to nothing, and most lately a Spanish bond scheme that collapsed in the spring. I do not yet know the whole of it, but the trust audit falls due on the 1st of November, and the review of my own accounts a week after, and a man who has lost what is not his to lose will do a great deal to keep 2 sets of books from being opened at once." "He would do murder," Ruth said. "He has done murder," the Duke said quietly. "Hiram Lemmer is dead, because a man I called godfather wanted a clean accounting. He meant me dead. He meant Theo dead. There cannot be a male heir alive when the books open. He meant us both in the ditch with Hiram, a coaching accident at a bad gate. The keeper blamed. The matter closed." Ruth sat very still. "The keeper blamed," she said. "This gate has had 3 highwayman incidents in 2 years," the Duke said. "The trust has been considering whether to replace the keeper. Penrhys is also a trustee of the Bedford Turnpike, and he chose your gate. A bad gate, a keeper already under doubt, a woman alone, forgive me, whom no one would trouble to believe. If I had died here, you would have been blamed for it, and I begin to think that was no accident of his planning either." The cold that went through Ruth then was not the October cold. She got up and took down from the dresser the trust's last letter, the one that had come in the summer, doubtful of her, asking after the incidents on her watch, and put it on the table. "There have been 3 letters over the summer from the trust, recommending I be looked at. I thought it was only that I am a woman, and they would rather a man on the gate." She looked at him. "Whose hand were they in, Your Grace?" The Duke looked at the letter. He did not need to read it. "Penrhys is the senior trustee of the Bedford Turnpike," he said. "It would have crossed his desk. It may well have started there." He drew a breath. "He has been preparing the ground to be rid of you since before he hired your murder, for the same reason he needs me gone. Because you keep the book, the only thing in England that puts his hired men at this gate by the hour. You wrote down the crime before it happened, without knowing it. That makes you the second most dangerous person to him alive." "Who is the first?" "My son," the Duke said, and his arm tightened around the sleeping boy. She gave him the sanctuary before he asked for it. She heard herself give it. "You'll stay, both of you, until you can stand a journey and we can get word to someone you trust, without it going through a man who wants you dead. The gate stays closed for repairs. As far as the road knows, the Duke of Avonmere died at Asher's Gate on the 14th of October, and there is a sad fool of a widow keeping a closed gate, and that is all there is to know. Let him think it worked. It buys us days." The Duke looked at her a long moment. "You understand what you're taking on," he said. "If he learns I'm alive in your house, he needs you and Theo and me, all 3, to simply disappear. And a closed toll house off the road in October is a very easy place for 3 people to disappear from. You would be safer to put us out on the road tonight and swear you never saw us." "I would," Ruth agreed. "Then why?" She thought about it honestly, because he had been honest with her, and found the answer was not the one she expected. "Because I have spent 3 years opening this gate for coaches full of people who would not look at my face," she said. "3d the wheel, and the arm goes up, and no one so much as turns their head, because what is a gatekeeper but a thing that lifts the arm? And the one night a carriage went over in front of me, there was a man inside who said my father would have liked me, and a little boy who took hold of my sleeve and would not let go, and they looked at my face. Both of you looked at my face." She steadied her voice. "I am not going to put that back out on the road to be murdered. That is the whole of my reason, and it is not a sensible one, and I will thank you not to argue with it." He did not argue. He looked at her with something in his face she did not have a name for, and after a moment said very low, "You opened the gate." "I keep telling you," she said. "That is the job." But it was not the job he meant, and they both knew it, and she turned to the kettle. That night the danger came back. She heard it before she saw it, by the team at the bend. 2 horses, ridden not driven, slowing where her gate arm crossed the road, then standing, then a voice asking another, something she could not hear, then nothing for a long time, which was worse than the asking. She was at the window in the dark with her hand over the candle. The Duke was awake on the instant, a fevered man, but a soldier's son, up off the table bed without a sound. She put her finger to her lips. The boy slept. 2 horsemen, she breathed, standing at the arm, looking at the house. "Testing whether I lived," the Duke murmured. "He has heard nothing. No body recovered, no funeral, a closed gate. He has sent men to see what is here." "The wheel rims," Ruth said suddenly. She had not seen the riders. She did not need to. "Listen, the near horse throws its off for. I heard that beat on the 14th. These are the same 2 men, the ones in my book." She did not wait. She woke the boy with a hand over his mouth and her face close so he would not be frightened, and carried him and half-walked the Duke across the dark yard to the old wood store no one used, and shut them into the dark among the cordwood, and came back alone, and opened her own door to the night as if she had been roused from sleep. "Who's there at my gate at this hour?" she called, cross and sleepy, a widow disturbed. "The gate's closed for repairs. Can you not read the board, or do you want me to read it to you?" A silence. Then a man's voice, careful. "We're looking for a coach. Came up this road a week back. Gentleman and a child. There was an accident." "There was," Ruth said. "Terrible thing. Coach went over at the bend, coachman killed outright. They took the gentleman and the boy south to the surgeon at St. Neots, but I heard after that he died of it on the road, and the child too. God rest them. You've come too late, and too far north. The bodies went south." She let her voice crack, which was not hard, because the lie was made of true grief, only pointed the wrong way. "Now, will you let a tired woman shut her door?" Another silence. She let them see only a worn woman in a doorway with red eyes, which is what she was, and gave them nothing to take back but the thing they hoped to hear, that the Duke of Avonmere was dead. The horses turned. The off-four threw its beat down the road, south, fast, and was gone. She stood in the doorway until the cold had got all the way into her bones, then crossed the road and let 2 frightened people out of the wood store. The boy was crying without sound the way he had cried at first, and she carried him in against her shoulder and rocked him by the fire and said nothing, because there was nothing to say that was true and comforting both, and she would not lie to him the way she had lied at the gate. "You sent them away," the Duke said. He was grey with the effort of the night and with something else. "I sent them away believing you dead, which is what we want. But he'll not be satisfied with 2 men's word forever. He'll come again, and harder. We have bought days, not safety." "You lied to murderers in your own doorway to keep my son alive," the Duke said. "Mistress Asher." "Ruth," she said, surprising herself for the 2nd time in a week. "If you are going to thank me, you may as well do it to my name. I'm tired of being thanked by a man who calls me Mistress Asher as if I were a shop." "Ruth," he said, and the way he said it was a thing she carried into the next day and the next, and did not examine, because she was afraid of what she would find. They came again on the 3rd night after, and this time they did not ask. She smelled it before the fire took. Pitch, the hot tarry stink of it, at the back wall where the kitchen chimney warmed the stone, then the small light of it starting low against the wall outside her window, and a man's shape stooping there in the dark with a brand. 2 of them again, quieter, surer. Men sent to make a closed toll house with 3 people in it, burned down in the night, a chimney spark in a dry October, the keeper and her visitors lost in the blaze. Tidy, a man who liked tidy accounts. She did not scream and she did not freeze. She had a winch handle by the door, iron, 2 foot of it, and shoulders 12 years of the gate had made, and she went out the front and around the dark side of the house low and fast, and came on the stooping man before he heard her, and did what a woman alone on a road learns she may one day have to do. She did not kill him. She broke his arm above the wrist with the winch handle, and put the second man off his feet when he came at her, and stood over the both of them in the firelight with the iron up and her breath soaring. I have sent for the magistrate, and you may wait for him or run, but take one step toward that house, and I will lay you down beside your friend. She had sent for no magistrate. There was no one to send. But she said it with 3 years of refused toll behind it, and they believed the iron, if not the magistrate, and took their broken arm and ran. And she beat the pitch fire off her wall with a wet sack until her arms gave out, and the stone was only blackened and the house still stood. She was shaking when she came in, and she let herself shake. The Duke was on his feet against the doorframe, white, furious at being useless with his bound side, and the boy was awake and silent, and Ruth set the winch handle down by the door very carefully, because if she had not, she would have flung it across the room. He has stopped sending men to look. Now he is sending men to finish it. That changes things. Ruth, it changes things, she said again. I've driven them off twice, and I cannot do it a third time, not against men who mean it. We cannot wait here for you to mend. We have to get word south to someone who is yours and not his, and you have to tell me tonight who you can trust with your life and your son's, because I am betting both of them on your answer. The Duke slid down the doorframe and sat, because his legs would not hold him, and the boy went to him, and Ruth crouched in front of them both, and in the light of the fire she had just beaten out, she made him name his allies. Drury, he said. Adam Drury, my solicitor at Lincoln's Inn. He has been my man and my father's. He loathes Penrith, and he is the only man in London I would trust with this. But the post can be watched, and a letter in my hand is a confession that I am alive. Then it will not go in your hand, and it will not go through the post, Ruth said. It will go in mine, by the St. Neot's carrier I have known 8 years, who owes me a winter's toll I did not charge him. He will carry a plain letter from a plain widow to a law chambers and think nothing of it, because widows write to lawyers about their dead husband's affairs every day, and no one watches a widow. She was already at the dresser for paper. Tell me what to write that Drury will know is from you and no one else, the Duke thought. Then slowly, the ghost of the smile again, sadder this time. Tell him the Greek tutor was wrong about the second aorist, and Avonmere has need of him at Asher's Gate, and he is to come himself and tell no one, and bring the audit of the personal account without letting Penrith's bank know he has asked. Drury will understand every word of that. Penrith, if he ever read it, would understand the first half and think it a madwoman's letter. Ruth wrote it in her steady clerk's hand, and signed it Ruth Asher, widow, of Asher's Gate, because that was who the world believed wrote letters to lawyers. At first light, she walked up the Wyboston Lane in the frost and gave it to the carrier with 3pence and a loaf, and watched it go south, not knowing if she had just saved 3 lives or posted them to the gallows. Adam Drury came north 4 days later, alone, mud to the thigh, and did a thing Ruth never forgot. He came into her kitchen, saw the Duke of Avonmere alive on her settle with the boy asleep across his knees, and sat down on her floor and put his face in his hands. The Duke said, "Adam," and the lawyer said, into his hands, "They had it in the London papers. I have spent 4 days believing I had let you be murdered." "You let nothing," the Duke said. "She kept the gate." And Drury took his hands from his face and looked at Ruth at her own hearth, and got up off her floor and bowed to her fully, the way a man bows to a duchess, which she was not. "Mistress Asher, I have known this man since he was a boy, and I have never seen his face look the way it looks now. I think I am in your debt the rest of my life." "You can be in my debt for a hot meal," Ruth said, because the bowing made her chest ache, and she did not know what to do with it. "Sit, there's broth, and bring out whatever you carried up from London." What Drury had carried up from London changed the war. He had not been idle. He had told no one, but he had begun, quietly, to pull threads, and the first, the one the Duke had not dared hope for, was a gunsmith. "There is a gunsmith at Long Acre," Drury said, over the broth, named Reuben Tovell. A particular fowling piece came back to his bench on the 15th of October with a fired barrel, and a hired team came back lathered the same morning. He took £80 in marked sovereigns from a gentleman on the 12th and asked no questions, and he has sat up in the dark every night since the papers printed your Grace's death, because he understood at last exactly what his fowling piece had been hired to do. "How do you know this?" the Duke asked. "Because I showed his apprentice, his own son Saul, the piece on the rack and asked when it had last been fired, and Tovel told the boy to hold his tongue. A man who has done nothing does not tell his son to hold his tongue. He will turn, your grace. He is half turned already, of his own conscience." And he kept the gentleman's note. The Duke set down his cup. He kept the note, he repeated. A single sheet, no salutation, naming a bend, an hour, a team, and £80 on completion, in a hand you and I could read, though Tovel could not. He kept it in his bench drawer by instinct, against a day he prayed would not come. He looked at the Duke. If Tovel swears to that note, and that note is in Penrhys's hand, then we do not have a widow's word against a baronet's. We have a gunsmith, a note, a hired team, and a toll book. We have a rope. And Ruth, listening, understood that her book, her plain-ruled foolscap, threepence the wheel, had just become a thing that hanged a knight of the realm. It took the rest of October to build, and Ruth was at the centre of all of it, because all of it ran through her gate. Dr. Marwer came up from Eton-so-Con, sent for at last, now there was no pretending the house was empty, and wrote a report in his own careful hand. He found the powder marks where they would be from a piece fired from height at 30 paces, not where they would be from a horseman's pistol fired close. A stout, grey-whiskered man, he had stood under the oak on the south verge and sighted down at the road himself, doing geometry with his eye. A fowling piece fit the wounds, he wrote. A robber's pistol did not. He drew it. He signed it. Jacob Lemmer came, the dead coachman's brother, head ostler at the Black Bull, and gave a statement that a London gentleman with a Welsh way of speaking, in a grey overcoat, had stood in the inn yard on the 5th of October and asked his brother Hiram, easy and friendly, about the Duke's road north and his livery and the hours of his change at Stilton, and tipped him a half-sovereign. Jacob had thought nothing of it. Gentlemen asked ostlers things. He thought of it now, with his brother in the churchyard, and could barely hold the pen for his shaking. But he signed. Drury rode south again, and was gone 5 days, and came back the colour of a man who has seen the bottom of a well. He had been to the bank, Penrhys and Marbury, in Cornhill, not by the front. He had gone to a junior clerk named Levi Oxby, 29, who for 3 months had been quietly copying the pages no one was meant to see, against a day he was not sure would come. A young man, Drury said, with a conscience too large for his salary. Oxby gave him a copy of the Avonmere account from 16 years back to the present, signed in his own hand, with the cover of the honest senior partner Marbury, who had been kept in the dark 15 years, and who, when the books were finally opened to him, had gone white and sat down and said only, "God forgive me, I never looked." Drury laid the audit copy on Ruth's deal table beside the toll book in the lamplight, and the three of them looked at it. The Duke, his solicitor, and the gatekeeper. £62,000 gone from the Duke's account, 15 years of it, sugar and stock and tin and silver, and a Spanish bond that died in the spring. 19,000 more from the late Duchess Lucinda's separate Yorkshire estate, the boy's inheritance through his mother, the thing Lord Colebrook stood to absorb if the boy died, and the bank itself hollow underneath, a house with no floor under it, waiting for the first hard knock to fall through. He did not steal because he was poor, the Duke said, staring at the columns. He stole because he was sure, every year sure, the next scheme would make it whole before anyone looked. And this year 2 audits fall in the same fortnight, and he cannot make it whole, so the only thing left is to make the men who would look at the book stop being alive to look. He put his hand flat on the page. He taught me that a gentleman's word was his bond, and he believed it the whole time he was doing this. That is the part I cannot get past. Ruth said nothing. She was looking at the last thing Drury had laid down. Not a bank page, but a letter, copied from the Bedford Turnpike Trust's own correspondence book, which Drury had opened on the Duke's authority on the way north. It was Penrhys's 3rd letter to the Trust, recommending the dismissal of the keeper at Asher's Gate, in light of repeated highway incidents, dated the 8th of October, 6 days before the men he had hired came to the oak above her gate. Ruth read it twice. Then she set it down and looked at the Duke and said, in a voice she kept very level, "He decided I would be blamed for your murder 6 days before he had you murdered. He was so sure of his tidy account that he wrote the ending down before the beginning." She folded her hands so they would not do anything. I have kept this gate 3 years and balanced it to the penny and never once refused the night arm, and a man in London I have never met decided I was the rubbish his crime would be swept under, because I am a woman and alone, and no one watches a widow." "Ruth," the Duke said. "No one watches a widow," she said again, and there was iron in it now, the winch handle in it. Well, he should have, because that is exactly why I saw everything. The Trust quarterly meeting was set for the 1st of November, at 10 o'clock, in the upstairs assembly room of the Black Bull at Eton-so-Con. Penrhys himself had convened it. Drury brought that news back too, and it was the news that decided the shape of everything. 2 pieces of business, the notice said: the dismissal of Ruth Asher from Asher's Gate, on grounds of repeated highway incidents on her watch, and the formal acceptance into the trustees' record of the death of the Duke of Avonmere in a coaching accident on the road past her gate. Penrhys was going to stand up in a room full of country gentlemen and close both accounts at once, bury the Duke in the Trust's minute book, and turn the widow out of her house in the same morning, and have the toll house searched for irregularities after, the toll book taken into the Trust's custody where it would lose itself in the archive within the month. He had thought of everything. He had even thought of the book. "He has given us the room," Drury said softly. "He has gathered every trustee in the county into one place, the magistrate Sir Marmaduke Lacy among them, and the coffee room below will be full of the morning's mail coach travellers in the village. If your Grace wishes to come back from the dead, he could not have chosen you a better stage if he had tried." "Then we use his stage," the Duke said. They planned it at Ruth's table, the 4 of them now, for Toval had turned, fully, at last, ridden up from London under a constable's guard, a thin, grey, frightened man who had given his sworn deposition and asked for nothing but a guaranteed apprentice's place for his son Saul, and got it on the Duke's word, and wept at the getting of it. And they laid it out like a coach stage, who would come up the stair, and in what order, and what would be laid on the long oak table, and when. The toll book, open at the 14th of October. The autograph note, open beside it. The audit copy, open beside that. Moore's report. Jacob Lemmer's statement. Marbury, white and quiet, to say that yes, these were his bank's books, and no, he had not known. And Toval, sober, under oath, to say in his own words who had paid him £80 on the 12th of October, and what for. And the Duke of Avonmere, alive, on a stick, walking in at the head of the stair. "It is good," Drury said when they had it. "It is very good, but there is a weakness in it, Your Grace, and you will not like me for naming it." "Name it." "The toll book," Drury said. "It is the spine of the whole case, the only document that places the hired men at the gate by the hour, and everything else hangs from it. And it was kept by—" He hesitated, and looked at Ruth, and went on because he was an honest man. "By a woman the Trust is at this moment moving to dismiss for incompetence. At the assizes his counsel will say, 'Here is the book of a woman about to be turned off her gate for letting highwaymen run riot,' and now she produces a book that conveniently hangs the man dismissing her. They will say she invented it, that she is a discredited woman with a grudge and a pen, and a jury of country gentlemen will look at her hands and her widow's blackened wonder." He spread his own hands, hating it. The book is only as good as the character of the keeper, and Penrhys has spent 4 months attacking the character of the keeper. That is the weakness. The kitchen was quiet. The fire ticked. Ruth stood at her hearth and felt the truth of it land on her, that her 3 years of balancing the book to the penny weighed nothing against 4 months of a baronet's letters, because she was a widow alone, and no one watches a widow until they need to disbelieve her. And the Duke of Avonmere stood up from the table, slowly, his hand on his healing side, and crossed the kitchen to her, and said the thing she had been dreading and hoping for in equal measure without letting herself know it. "There is a way to make the book unimpeachable," he said, "and I have turned from saying it for 2 days, because I did not want you to think it was the only reason. So I will say the reason first, and the use second, and you may believe me or not as you choose, but you will hear the order I put them in. Your Grace. The reason," he said, "is that I have been a dead man for 3 weeks, in the eyes of the world and very nearly in my own. And in those 3 weeks, in a closed toll house with a hole in my side and my son's hand in yours, I have been more alive than I have been since Lucinda died. You made me say her name. You made my son say the word he had not dared say in his own house. You beat a fire off your wall with your bare arms to keep a child you owe nothing alive. I know you better after 3 weeks than I knew men. I called friends 30 years, and I do not want to walk back into my life and leave you keeping a gate. I want you. I have been afraid to say it, because a duke who has lost everything is a poor thing to laugh at. Ruth could not look at him. She looked at the fire. Now the use, he said more quietly, because you would never forgive me if I hid it. If you were the Duchess of Avonmere, then the keeper of that book is not a discredited widow about to be turned off a gate. She is a woman of unimpeached standing, and no council in England can call her a liar with a grudge, because she has nothing to gain that she did not already have. Your name in the parish register makes the book unbreakable. It puts Theo under the Avonmere style, with a guardian who is his stepmother, and not the man trying to kill him, and it ends Calbrook's claim on Lucinda's estate for good. It protects you, and the book, and my son, all three, in one act. He drew a breath. That is the use, and it is real. But I put the reason first, and I meant it first. I am asking for the reason. It was the most words she had ever heard him say. The fire ticked. Outside, the gate arm she had wound down 3 weeks ago stood across the empty road. Ruth thought of the small set of clothes folded in the bottom of a chest, and of 3 years of coaches whose passengers would not look at her face. She thought of the cost. She always thought of the cost first. It was what the gate had taught her, and found, turning it over in the firelight, that for the first time in 3 years the cost was not the largest thing in the room. She made herself look at him. You put the reason first, she said. I heard you put the reason first. I did. Then I will not answer the use, Ruth said. It can take care of itself. I am answering the reason. Her voice was not steady now, and she let it not be. I have kept this gate alone, Augustus, opening the arm 3,000 times for people who looked through me, and I told myself I wanted nothing, because wanting is how I lost the last one. I told myself the wound was scarred shut, and you and that boy went over in front of my gate and opened it again. The whole of it, everything I had folded away. So yes. The answer is yes. Not for the use, for the reason. God help us both, for the reason. He did not embrace her. He was a man with a hole in his side, and she a woman who had not been touched gently in 3 years, and neither quite knew how. He took her right hand instead, with its rope callus across the palm, and turned it over and pressed his mouth to the hard ridge the winch had made, and that undid her more than anything else could have done, that he kissed the part of her the gate had made. At dawn, he said, before the meeting. Catlow at St. Mary the Virgin will do it on a special licence. Drury has had it in his bag 3 days, the presumptuous man. At dawn, we are married, and at 10 o'clock the Duchess of Avonmere walks into the assembly room of the Black Bull with her own toll book under her arm, and we end Penrhys. At dawn, Ruth said, and in the back room, the boy who had stopped speaking and started again turned over in his sleep and did not wake, and the gate stood closed across the road for one more night. Before the dawn there was one more visit, and it was the worst, because it was Penrhys himself. It was the 29th of October. Ruth knew the carriage the moment it took the bend. A town chariot, well sprung, a matched pair, the kind of equipage that had never once paid her 3pence because the man who owned it had never thought the toll applied to him. It slowed at her arm. She went out with her lantern, the Duke and the boy hidden in the back room, and stood at the chariot window with her heart going like the winch ratchet, and looked for the first time at the man who had decided to murder her. He was old. That was the thing that struck her. 64, white-haired, in the grey overcoat, with the easy, kindly, certain manner of a man who has been deferred to for 50 years. He did not look like a murderer. He looked like the sort of man who would have taught a boy his Greek and meant well by it. Toll-keeper, he said, pleasant. I'll not pay it. The gate's closed in any case, I see. You'll be the widow Asher. I am, sir. You'll be off this gate by the 2nd of November, Penrhys said, kindly, the way a man tells a servant a thing already decided elsewhere. The trust meets on the 1st. There have been too many incidents on this stretch. It is no reflection on you, but only this month a great gentleman lost his life at your very bend. A duke, no less. You'll have heard. He shook his head. Sorrowful. Certain. A bad business. The road is too much for a woman alone. The trust will see you settled somewhere gentler. Ruth stood at his window and understood that she was being condoled with by the man who had done it for the consequences of the thing he had done, and that he believed every word of his own kindliness. And the coldest thing of all was that she could see how the Duke had trusted him 30 years, because the kindliness was real. It was real, and it sat on top of murder, and the man could not feel the seam. "That's a great pity about the Duke, sir," she said, and kept the worn, closed face of the widow at Ashes, and gave him only what he expected. "I'll be sorry to leave the gate. My husband kept it, and his father before." I am sure," said Sir Geoffrey Penrhys, already wrapping the roof for his coachman to drive on. "A sad thing, but the road must be kept safe, you understand. The road must be kept open." And the chariot pulled away south toward the Black Bull, toward the room where he meant to close every account in the morning. The road must be kept open. Ruth watched his lamps go down toward the village, and found she was not afraid any more. She had been afraid for 3 weeks. The night they fired the wall, the night they came testing, every hour of the long fevered week, the fear went out of her now, watching the murderer's lamps shrink down the dark road, and what came in to fill its place was something colder and steadier, and entirely her own. She went back inside. The Duke was at the window's edge in the dark. He had heard all of it. "That was him," he said. Not a question. That was his voice. "That was him," Ruth said. "He told me the road must be kept open. He told me he'd see me settled somewhere gentler." She set the lantern down. "In the morning, I will settle him." They were married in the chancel of St. Mary the Virgin at Eton Socon at 7 o'clock on the morning of the 1st of November, in the grey before full light, with the frost still on the churchyard yews. The Reverend Mr. Catlow read it over them in the cold, his breath smoking, the special licence open on the rail. Ruth wore her best black, the gown she had last worn to bury Caleb, and carried the toll book under her arm because she would not be parted from it on this of all mornings. The Duke stood with his stick, and Dr. Moore's hand at his elbow, his side still bound under his coat, Lucinda's ring on his little finger. Mistress Moore held the boy. 3 village witnesses stood at the chancel rail, roused early and giddy with the secret of it, and the boy Theo watched with his father's steady eyes, and when Catlow pronounced them man and wife, he said, into the ringing quiet of the church, not knowing it was not the moment for speaking, "Are you my mamma now?" And Ruth, Duchess of Avonmere for the space of one breath, knelt on the chancel step in her widow's black with the toll book against her chest and said, "I am whatever you want me to be, Theo. If you want a mamma, I will be your mamma, and I will say your other mamma's name with you whenever you like, so you never have to lose her to have me. You can have us both. I promise you can have us both." The boy put his arms around her neck. The Duke stood over the two of them with one hand on his stick and the other over his mouth, and Dr. Moore looked very hard at a memorial brass on the wall, and Catlow blew his nose, and outside the frost began to burn off the yews as the sun came up on the 1st of November. Then they went to the Black Bull, where there was a man to settle. The assembly room of the Black Bull was the long oak-floored room over the coffee room, the morning light coming in grey from the inn-yard windows. The Bedford Turnpike trustees were assembled. Sir Marmaduke Lacy, the county magistrate, sat at the head by accident of having arrived first. Sir Geoffrey Penrhys at his right, the day's papers laid in a neat fan, the resolution to dismiss the keeper at Asher's Gate, the minute recording the death of the Duke of Avonmere. 6 more trustees sat along the table, the clerk Mr. Fawkes at the side desk with his pen, and below, in the coffee room, the morning's mail coach travellers and the village, and a knot of newspaper men from the Bedford Mercury and the Northampton Herald that Adam Drury had taken the quiet precaution of inviting, all of them murmuring, not knowing why this morning's meeting might be worth their while. Penrhys rose. Ruth, on the stair outside the door with her husband's hand on her arm and the toll book against her chest, heard the chair scrape and the room settle, and the kindly certain old voice begin, "Gentlemen, we have 2 sad matters of business, and I will not detain you long, for the day is cold and the road wants us. The first concerns the keeper at Asher's Gate. It is no pleasure to me. She is a respectable woman who has done her best, but the incidents on that stretch have become a scandal, and only this month a great and good man, His Grace the Duke of Avonmere, my own godson, whom I have loved since his cradle." And here the old voice broke beautifully, exactly as much as it should, and Ruth on the stair felt her hands close on the book. "Lost his life at her very gate. I move that the keeper be dismissed, and that we record with the deepest sorrow the death of his Grace. And so close." Ruth opened the door. It was she who opened it. They had argued it the night before. Drury had wanted the Duke to enter first, the dead man walking. and the Duke had looked at Ruth across the table and said, "No." She opens it. She has opened every gate on this road for 3 years. She opens this one. So it was Ruth Asher who pushed open the door at the head of the stair, the toll book against her chest, and behind her, on his stick, alive, in mourning black with his late wife's ring on his hand, came Augustus Winford, 5th Duke of Avonmere, whom the man at the head of the table had just finished burying. The room made a sound she never forgot. Not a scream, a kind of indrawn groan, 20 men's breath going in at once, chairs going back, Fawkes's pen rolling off the side desk onto the floor, and Sir Geoffrey Penrhys, who had been speaking of his murdered godson with tears in his eyes, stopped with his mouth open and the colour going out of his face like wine out of a tipped glass, and stood holding the edge of the table. "Sit down, Sir Geoffrey," the magistrate said. He had not understood yet. No one had. But a magistrate of 30 years knows the shape of a thing going wrong in a room, and he said it again, harder. "Everyone will keep their seats." The Duke walked to the foot of the table on his stick, Ruth beside him, and behind them came the others in the order they had planned on a gatekeeper's kitchen floor. Adam Drury with the bundle, the gunsmith Tovall between 2 constables, then Moore and Jacob Lemmer, and the bank clerk Oxby with the audit copy held in both hands, the silent partner Marbury at the rear, and Mistress Moore at the back with the boy. The Duke did not make a speech. He had told Ruth he would not. He let the papers make it. "I am not dead, Sir Marmaduke," he said to the magistrate mildly, into the ringing silence. "I was shot through the side at the bend above Asher's Gate on the 14th of October. My son through the shoulder, and my coachman Hiram Lemmer was killed. We did not die in the ditch as we were meant to. We were kept alive by the keeper of that gate, whom you are this morning being asked to dismiss." He laid his hand on Ruth's shoulder. "She is my wife, as of 7 o'clock this morning at St. Mary the Virgin, and she has brought you her book." Ruth stepped to the table and laid the toll book open on the oak before the magistrate, at the 14th of October, in her own steady clerk's hand, 3d the wheel, and the 2 lines that mattered: 2 horsemen north, unpaid, at 42 minutes past 9, the near horse throwing its off 4, the same 2 south, faster, at 18 minutes past 11, 1 beast near foundered. Drury laid the autograph note open beside it. A bend, an hour, a team, £80, in Sir Geoffrey Penrhys's hand. Oxby, his hands shaking so that Drury had to steady the pages, laid the audit copy open beside that. £62,000, 19,000, 15 years. And Tovall, sworn, stood between his 2 constables and said, in a thin Longacre voice that carried all the way down to the coffee room, what he had been paid, and by whom, and for what, and that the gentleman who paid him £80 in marked sovereigns on the 12th of October was the gentleman now standing at the magistrate's right hand in the grey overcoat, and that he, Reuben Tovall, had come to say so because his fowling piece was not made to murder children. Sir Geoffrey Penrhys rose from his chair to leave the room. "You will sit, Sir Geoffrey," said the magistrate, and this time there was no question in it, and the 2 constables that had brought Tovell moved without being told to stand between the baronet and the door. And then the magistrate turned to Ruth, to the new Duchess of Avonmere in her widow's black with her hand still flat on her own open book, because it was her gate and her book, and somewhere in his old country sense of order he knew the word belonged to her. "Your Grace," he said, "you kept this book. You will say to this table what it is." Ruth Asher. Winford looked down the long oak table at the old man who had decided, 6 days before he had it done, that she would be the rubbish his murder was swept under, and she said what she had carried up the stair. "I have opened this gate 3 years for the Bedford Trust at 3d the wheel," she said. Her voice did not shake. "I opened my kitchen table when your fowling piece sent the Duke and his son through it. The Trust can decide whose hands belong on the Bedford Road." No one spoke. Below, the coffee room had gone silent too, listening up the stair. Sir Marmaduke Lacy took up the toll book and the note, looked from the one to the other, and set them down with the care of a man handling something that has become evidence, and committed Sir Geoffrey Penrhys, Baronet, then and there before the assembled trustees, to the warrant of the Bedfordshire Assizes, for the attempted murder of the Duke of Avonmere, for the attempted murder of Lord Theodore Winford, a child of 4 years, for the murder of Hiram Lemmer, coachman, for the corruption of a trustee, and for the embezzlement of trust funds against the Avonmere estate, and against the late Duchess Lucinda's separate Yorkshire holdings, and the kindly, certain old face that had wept for its murdered godson 5 minutes before came apart at last, and Sir Geoffrey Penrhys was led down the stair he had meant to walk down in triumph, through the parted crowd of the coffee-room, out into the inn-yard where Jacob Lemmer stood at the door of the stable his brother would never come back to, and into the cold morning. In the assembly room, the boy Theo wriggled down from Mistress Moa's arms and ran the length of the long oak table to Ruth and took hold of her sleeve and held. And the toll book lay open on the table in the grey light, and it was, at last, only a book again. The following spring, April of 1831, the south drive of Avonmere Hall in Buckinghamshire ran long and gravelled between 2 lines of new green limes, and along it, on a mild, bright afternoon, a small boy walked between his father's open hands and his stepmother's. He was 5 now. He walked the gravel holding to neither of them, and ready to take either, the way the very young walk when they have at last decided the world is to be trusted, and part way down the drive he ran ahead into the sun and turned and called back, clear as a bell, the word a closed toll house off the Great North Road had taught him he could say, "Papa, Papa, come and see." And Augustus Winford, who had been a kind father in everything but speech for 2 years, stood in the April light, with his hand at last off his stick, and heard his son call him Papa down a long drive in the sun, and could not, for a moment, speak. Ruth stood beside him, 6 months gone now with their first, and said nothing, because there was nothing to say that the moment did not already hold. She had learned that, keeping the gate. There were hours that wanted speech and hours that wanted only that you stand inside them and let them pass through you, open. A great deal had passed through that winter. Sir Geoffrey Penrhys had been tried at the Bedfordshire Assizes in February and convicted on all 5 counts. The murder count for Hiram Lemmer had drawn a death sentence, commuted to transportation on the grounds of his age and his old diplomatic service. The lesser counts, 14 years. And in April, the same mild week the limes came green, the man who had taught the Duke his Greek had sailed for Van Diemen's Land and would not come back. His elder daughter, Miss Cornelia Penrhys, had repudiated him to his face at the trial, and sold the Carmarthenshire estate to make the Duke's account whole as far as it would reach, and now lived quietly at Tenby. Penrhys and Marbury had failed in November, the flawless house falling through at last. Honest, slow Septimus Marbury was made bankrupt and took the loss on himself like a penance. Levi Oxby, the clerk who had copied the pages no one was meant to see, was the Duke's London man of business now, and slept, he said, better than he had in a year. Reuben Tovell served 12 months as accessory, and his boy Saul was apprenticed to the Avonmere forge with the Duke's hand on the indenture. Jacob Lemmer was landlord of the Black Bull now, with a small carved plaque in the inn-yard to his brother Hiram. Lord Calbrook, let off with a heavy fine on the grounds that he had not quite known what he was made party to, had come to Avonmere in March and met his nephew at last, and wept, and had written twice since. And Asher's Gate had a new keeper. The toll house had been repainted at the Duke's expense, the blackened wall made good, the gate armoury hung true. Above the gate arch a small slate stone had been set, carved with a single name and 2 dates, Caleb Asher, and the years of his keeping. The new keepers were a young Eton-Socon couple, William and Jenny Marrow, chosen by Ruth herself and installed in February on the old terms, and the new toll book was already filling in Jenny's careful hand, 3pence the wheel. The old book, Caleb's hand and Ruth's, the book that had hanged a knight of the realm, hung framed under glass in the library at Avonmere. The boy ran back up the drive and seized a hand of each of them and swung between them, and they let him, and walked the rest of the way in the April sun, the 3 of them, and the 4th coming, and the road was open all the way to the house. That evening, when the light had gone gold and then grey, they drove out to Asher's Gate to walk the road at dusk the way she had walked it 1,000 times alone. The Marrow's lamp was lit in the toll house window. When the carriage drew up, young William Marrow came out and wound the arm up for them, and it went up smooth and true on its new hinge, and the boy Theo was through the open gate and running on the moonlit road before anyone could call him back, laughing. Ruth and Augustus stood under the gate arch in the dusk, by the small slate stone with Caleb's name on it. "Caleb Asher," Ruth said aloud, looking up at the stone. "He kept this gate honestly, and it killed him, and I will not have him forgotten." "Caleb Asher," her husband said with her. "Easy now. the way she had taught him the dead would rather be spoken than forgotten. And then, after a moment, his thumb going to the small black and pearl ring on his little finger, where it would always be. Lucinda. Lucinda, Ruth said with him, because she had promised the boy he could have them both, and that meant saying his other mother's name as readily as her own dead husband's, and she did, and it cost her nothing, and that was how she knew the wound had closed at last, and closed clean. The boy ran back through the open gate and stood between them, looking up, and Augustus Winford looked down the moonlit Great North Road north, the road that had taken her husband and brought him to her, that had carried his murder south past her gate, and carried his justice back, and said the word for the last time, the word she had carried alone for 3 years, and would not have to carry alone again. "You opened it," he said. "You kept it open for me." Ruth Asher Winford, Duchess of Avonmere, late the widow at Asher's Gate, put her calloused hand in her husband's, and her other on the head of the boy who had once been afraid to say his mother's name, and looked down the open road. "I keep gates," she said. "It is what I do." The arms stood up over the road in the moonlight, and the road north stayed open, and it was enough. It had always, in the end, only had to be enough.